Hello and welcome to today's lesson where we're looking at Monroe's motivated sequence and how to use Monroe's motivated sequence to create a really persuasive speech or presentation. Now, have you ever noticed that some people seem naturally able to give a great presentation? It can sometimes seem as though these people such as Steve Jobs or Martin Luther King, have an innate ability to orate and sell their ideas. Maybe you've experienced a great speaker in action for yourself during your own career and been stirred into action. Now, there's numerous reasons why you might want to improve your public speaking persuasion skills. Perhaps you're the leader of an organization and you need to rally your team around your strategic vision. Maybe you're a middle manager trying to motivate your team to achieve an objective. Or perhaps you're a team leader trying to convince your team to hit some kind of deadline. If any of those scenarios are familiar to you, then having a process you can go through to construct a persuasive argument is going to be useful to you. Now, when people first begin learning about organizing a presentation or a speech, they'll very often come across the tell them what you told them technique, which was first articulated by Aristotle. And in this technique, there's 3 steps. So basically, you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and finally, you tell them what you just told them. Now, in your organization, you may have come across this presentation technique hundreds of times. So it begins where you outline what's going to be covered in the presentation, then you move on to the main detailed body of the presentation, and then finally, you summarize the key points and make a recommendation. Now, it's a good technique because it's so easy to remember, but it's not exactly useful for motivating people into action, and that's where Monroe's motivated sequence comes in. So the best way to understand the basis for Monroe's motivated sequence is to understand what's wrong with the tell them what you told them technique. And it's really missing a couple of things, and those are the audience and suspense. So by the audience, what I mean is the audience are interested in their favorite topic, and it's not the contents of your presentation. Basically, they are only interested in themselves. So by building your presentation using the tell them what you told them technique, you're constructing your presentation around your content rather than your audience and what is of interest to them. So it's no real wonder if you're looking at your audience and they're starting to look glassy-eyed. So by suspense, what I mean is it's very difficult to keep people's attention when you're methodically plowing through facts and figures, especially in a kind of a corporate environment. So the reason for that should be pretty obvious because it's because there's no suspense. There's no promise of a revelation. So there's no real reason for them to keep listening. So is it any wonder why people are secretly checking their email? So Monroe's motivated sequence is a process for structuring a presentation or speech that addresses both of these issues. So let's take a look at it now. The diagram on the side of this slide shows the 5 steps to Monroe's motivated sequence. Now, the sequence derives its name from the fact that it motivates and inspires your audience to care about what you're speaking about. So let's go through each of the steps in turn to see what they mean. So the first step is attention. And in this step, the aim is to get the attention of your audience using some kind of attention grabber. Now, there's a number of attention grabbers you might choose to use. You could tell a dramatic story, you could ask a question, you could make a shocking statement, or you could find and then use some shocking statistic. Now, in general, people have very short attention spans. So once you have their attention, you need to move on quickly. But that's not to say this attention step completely replaces the introduction to your presentation. Instead, it kind of needs to be wrapped into your introduction, You still need to tell them who you are and why you're speaking to them and state what your presentation is about. and let your audience know what to expect. So step 2 is the need step. In this step, you need to convince your audience that there is a problem. So in step 1, you captured the audience's attention. Now you need to maintain it. So here we want to state the problem clearly and back this up by creating a real sense of urgency. So the kind of points you want to cover here are you want to back up any statements you make using statistics or some other kind of proof. You really want to talk about the consequences of keeping things as they are and not changing. But most importantly, to really move people to action, you want to show how the problem directly impacts your audience. So does the problem impact their health, their happiness, their job security, the future prospects of the organization you work for? So you really need to appeal to people's sense of fear or greed. So essentially what we're doing in this step is we're painting a picture to really get the audience to understand and to feel the need for change. So by the end of this step, your audience should be primed and eager to hear about how you're going to solve the problem. So step 3 is satisfaction. So now you've created this desire and urgency. You want to solve the problem. So it's time to deliver the meat of your presentation and propose your solution. So the steps you should follow here are really, you need to begin by introducing your solution or plan. You obviously want this to be complete, but at the same time you want it to be concise to avoid going into too much detail. Remember, you've worked really hard to get people to this point of your presentation and stay interested, so you don't want to lose them now. If it is going to take a significant amount of time to explain the plan, summarize your information from time to time at logical points as you work your way through it. Try to bring your solution to life using real life stories, and preempt objections by laying out your counter arguments to what you think will be likely objections from your audience. Ultimately, all you're trying to do in this step is leave your audience with a clear understanding of your plan. So step 4 is visualization, and in this step, now that your audience understands your solution, we need to intensify their desire for it, and we do this by showing how it will make their lives better. Now, there's 3 techniques you can use for visualizing the future. There's a positive method, negative method, and a contrast method. So in the positive method, you describe how the world will look if your plan is adopted. So with this method, you're saying, look how great the world will be in the future if we implement the plan. The negative method is obviously the opposite, where you describe how bad the world is going to look and the consequences for your organization or for the people in the presentation if we don't implement the plan. And the contrast method is kind of a combination of both the positive and negative methods. So you begin by describing the negative picture, and then you introduce the positive picture by describing and visualizing as eloquently as you can what the world will look like if your plan was implemented. Now, it's worth remembering that although you want to be as vivid as possible, you've got to remember that your visualization of the future also needs to be realistic. If it's not realistic, then there's a big risk you're going to lose your audience. So our final step is action. And what you're trying to do is conclude your speech by giving a final rousing appeal that encourages your audience to take action and take that action right now. So those are all the steps of Monroe's motivated sequence, but let's look at a pretty simple example just to bring it all to life. So in this example, we're going to consider a middle manager trying to give a rousing speech to get their team to deliver a pretty important project on time. So step 1, attention. So in the first step, the speaker opens with some kind of shocking fact that the project is likely to fail. So here they say, did you know that 68% of all IT projects fail? I know we haven't started working on it yet, but even so, that means that right now we have less than a 1 in 2 chance of delivering this project on time. So now that they've kind of grabbed people's attention, the next step is to make it personal by elaborating on how a late project is going to impact the lives of the team. So here they might say, we cannot afford for this project to be late, and right now we have a 1 in 2 chance of being late. So that means that inevitably we'll all have to work late nights towards the end of this project. We'll probably have to work weekends too. And as if that isn't bad enough, none of us will get a bonus either. Now, I don't say this to scare you, but that's the harsh reality of how projects typically go. So you can see what's happening. We're building kind of a connection that both we and our audience have a common problem we want to solve. So in the third step of Monroe's motivated sequence, the speaker shows a way for the team to avoid those negative consequences that we've just laid out. So what I'd like to propose is, rather than waiting until we're 6 months down the road and the only chance we have to rectify the situation is to work long hours and weekends, I'd like to propose that we get creative right now to stop that happening. If we come up with ideas now, smarter ways of doing things, ditch things we don't need now rather than waiting 6 months, then we might just have a chance to secure the schedule without the usual headaches for us all. So now that we've proposed our solution, the fourth step is to show how different the world would be if we actually adopted this proposal. So try to imagine what it would be like to finish this project on time. First off, as you know, not everyone has faith we can do this. Just think how good it would feel to prove them wrong. Second, imagine not just finishing the project on time, but doing so without having to go the extra mile and work weekend after weekend. Just picture in your head right now how you'd spend those weekends. Maybe you'll spend it with family or have a barbecue, or even use it to keep in shape. Whatever you do, it's got to be better than being cooped up in here for weekends at a time. So now we're on to the final step, and in this final step, the speaker simply tells them what they need to do right now to start taking the course of action that's being proposed. So what I'd like everyone to do right now is to go back to their desks and start coming up with ideas, however crazy, to shorten how long it takes to deliver this project. Send them direct to me by email, and we'll meet tomorrow as a team and discuss them as a group. Now, this is obviously a pretty contrived example, but hopefully it gives you, some good ideas as to how you could use Monroe's motivated sequence to structure your own presentations and speeches. Now, up to this point, we've described Monroe's motivated sequence as Monroe himself laid it out, but some people find it much easier to use the terminology that you can see in this diagram. It's a little bit more modern, I think, than the terminology Monroe used. So here you have a hook, you present the problem and make it personal, then you show your solution, explain what the future looks like, and finally there's a call to action. So, in summary, whether you're a natural presenter or you're new to Monroe's motivated sequence, it can really help you structure your presentation so you increase the likelihood of stirring your audience into action. It can take a bit of time to master the sequence, but once you've tried it a couple of times, your confidence will increase, and so too will the power of your speeches. So just as a quick recap, the 5 steps are: grab the attention of your audience, establish the problem in their minds and make it personal, present your solution, visualize a future with or without your solution, and provide a call to action to let your audience know exactly what to do next. It's a sequence that's been around since the 1930s, and it's sure to still be in use a long time from now. I hope you enjoy using it. Thank you.